You get your third IME completed.
Yeah.
Your employer, I guess at some point, receives this IME, and then what happens?
Then I was called in for for a third meeting, the true conclusion meeting.
So this is another investigative meeting? Is that what they...
They didn't say what it was going to be, but they just said it was they just called it the conclusion. So at this point, I didn't think there would be any more investigating to do, and I was correct. It turned out to be a very short meeting, and I was provided with a letter of expectation and told that I had to complete a review of the policies and procedures for the organization, for policies and procedures regarding medication administration, regarding conduct at work, that sort of thing.
Yeah,
and sign off that I had reviewed.
It's a great thing to bring, or a great point to bring up, or an opportunity to talk about how this is another example of how this disease is, on the one hand, being called a disease, and then here's another punitive action. And it's the same thing that happens. You'll see in criminal cases with healthcare professionals, often one of the clauses for as part of their rehabilitation or back to work will be to review an ethics course sometimes.
Yes.
These things are, do you think that there is even one person who has benefited realistically from this process?
No. And I think that it was revealing to the fact that it was about liability.
Yes.
It was all about liability.
Yeah.
And all about, and I don't blame them for that. I realized what a liability I was. In hindsight, I certainly realized what a liability I was.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a driver, a huge driver for so much of those moments that we've outlined so far, that it came back to liability. And this is a business.
Yeah. And like I said, it's like a hot potato. They don't, if they can get away with not taking that liability and pass it on to another authority, they will do it. And it's one of the reasons why this whole thing takes so long, is because often there'll be a game of catch back and forth until somebody's like, oh, okay, I guess I have to take responsibility for this part. And then and these measures are like the ethics or reviewing the policies. It's a waste of everybody's time. It doesn't help you with there at no time were you confused about whether what you were doing was against or a normal procedure.
Of course.
So, an interesting way to finish it off. So they say you got to review the manual, the policy manual, and is that where they left it?
Yeah, that was it. And then knowing that the next part of that would be the accommodation process and getting back to work. Okay. Again, at the same time was this process with the college was happening, where they now had all of the results of these various investigation meetings, and they had my confession, so to speak, and they had formalized that into a set of restrictions and another letter of expectation and restriction, so to speak. So that was happening at the same time. Okay. So now the college has been brought up to speed, and this is something they'll commonly do in these situations, is they'll put together a return to practice agreement that often involves some sort of a monitoring contract, along with several sets of different restrictions, usually to do with handling narcotics or working alone where narcotics might be present. In other words, you'll be going back to work, but it'll be under a contract that is set up so that you are saying for sure that you'll continue with your treatment throughout the term of the contract. So often more of them are 5 years now, but usually 3 to 5 years, and that you will abide by these limits and restrictions that are on your will be on your license for the term of that RPA.
And so did the college presented you with a list of restrictions, I guess?
Yeah, and it was very much like the restrictions that were laid out by the addiction specialist. There were no surprises in that.
Okay.
I knew the fact that, and I think this is something that people oftentimes don't know when they start in this process, that all of the conditions of the agreement aren't considered to have commenced until you return to work. So by this time, I had been off work for over a year. I had been doing over a year of a monitoring program of doing, urine testing, bi-weekly urine testing, and logging all of my meetings that I was going to, and that didn't count. That didn't count towards my monitoring agreement, which I know for a lot of people starting out, that's devastating news because it prolongs the process, and it kind of tells you, there's kind of a psychological piece to it that tells you that all of this work that you've done is for naught unless you are back working.
Yeah, and there's many of those throughout the entire process, including within the actual treatment program that you go to, whether it's inpatient or outpatient. The other thing that happens more often than not is there'll be a discrepancy between whether or not they want you to be working with narcotics right away, or if they want you in an area where you're not exposed to narcotics. And then there'll be clauses on top of that where if you might have to start out working where there's no access to narcotics, but your term only starts once you've made it to a point where the restriction can be lifted so that you can be in an area where narcotics are accessible. Yeah. So now your 5 year is turning into a 6. And then with all the extra stuff they add on there, before you know it, you've got, and this is, I mean, these contracts usually cost like a really, really inexpensive contract would be about $600 a month that either you're, depending on your profession, either you're paying or your insurance company's paying. And on the higher end of that, if you've got a sober link involved, they can be well over $1,000. Yeah. So that's extra money that's being pumped into this machine system. And there's conflicts of interest that exist within the system involving where that money goes, but that's another story.
Yeah.
So basically, they got you to the point where you're cleared to begin searching for jobs that are going to fit with the parameters they've laid out for you in your return to work agreement.
That's right. And again, the return to work agreement, though, it doesn't. It outlines the don'ts, but there is still there's still room for interpretation there. And as we will learn here in this next part of my story, that like you said, Corey is not to be working and dispensing narcotics. Fair enough. Corey's not to be. They recognize the fact that I was, not to work in an emergency or in a critical care area. Also fair enough. But those are black and white, but there are statements within the agreement that are much more gray. So when I finally, this is coming back now. Now we're up to 2.5 months ago. That in those meetings, that's what this other branch of human resources, the disability management branch, that's what they have in front of them. That is what is guiding I won't say guiding their decision, because I don't know what's guiding their decision fully, but that is what they are using as justification for some of their decisions, I'll say.
Okay. You mean the decisions regarding which jobs would be suitable for you?
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. So first of all, you are told in an accommodation meeting that you're allowed to look at the list of vacant jobs, and you're allowed to look at the list of filled jobs and make 2 lists based on those. And we're talking about, as it stands right now, because of the nature of nursing and the nature of, at least in our province and in our country, the mass shortage of nurses. This is a really long list. Like this is dozens and dozens and dozens. Probably, if I went back and I'd have to check, but hundreds of pages. of vacancies, and then jobs that I could potentially bump into.
Right.
And so made my initial list. And the things that I put at the top were, through this process, I've become particularly interested in the vulnerable populations of our society, in outreach work, in meeting populations of folks with addiction or folks that are experiencing homelessness. And there are new resources, there are new jobs out there, because there is some funding in those areas. So there are some newer positions out there available within where I live. So those really intrigued me, because I would be partly working at a desk and in sort of a case management administrative type of detail, and also partly going in and checking on people and helping people access care who wouldn't normally access it or be able to.
Right. And I remember there was one job in particular a little while ago that you had found that you were very interested in, and you thought it would be, I mean, it wasn't just that your contract stated you shouldn't be working in acute care. You yourself didn't want to put yourself back in that position. I mean, you could see that wasn't the place for you. You wanted to set yourself up so that you had a nice buffer between you and any substances or extreme stress and trauma and stuff like that that you were experiencing before in your position. So you wanted to get away from that, and you, like you said, you wanted to move into this area where you were just starting to learn about and get interested in. So I remember you saying that you were interested in a job like that, and then what happened when you, how do you have to apply for these positions?
You put in, you order your list based on the one that you desire most, and then I think I'd made 8 or 9 choices, and they go through that list. And with that outreach job, my union was supportive of that for me. And initially, the person from Human Resources said that they were supportive of that for me. WorkSafe was supportive of that for me. And in fact, I'd already started to do some prep work with WorkSafe, some exposure work, some going into or close to some encampments in my area, and just to see how that would feel.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was really getting ready,
right?
And told that should be a go. It was then at that point that Human Resources felt that there was some. I want to just go back a second. The manager of this position apparently said, this guy's interested, this guy's passionate about it, and has some experience. Love it. We'll take him.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounded like all systems were go. The person from Human Resources decided that they wanted verification from the college if this was within or without of my restrictions. And so we had to wait for that.
Right.
And then found out from the college that they were not comfortable. They felt that I shouldn't be working with a vulnerable population where there was potentially drugs and where I would potentially have to provide naloxone treatment. The thing there's a few things interesting about that is that anyone can provide naloxone anywhere. Any person can. The training for that is rudimentary and can be easily given to anybody. And the second thing was, I know that in the IME report from my addiction specialist, that she had explained why healthcare providers so often do not and will not turn to street drugs.
Hey, everybody. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks.